bonus content. No,
Yeah.
press the button.
About the Gregg's breakfast.
Greg's breakfast.
No.
Or cat cafes.
Oh.
Cat cafes. Kitty cafes.
Kitty cafes.
Yep. Can recommend the Kitty Cafe.
Science one. Everything looks better in slow motion.
That's bloody awful, isn't it?
What?
It's brilliant.
It's
the highlight of the
tantamount to
year.
assault.
Poor defenceless people.
Well,
What in mitigation?
should hold him a friend.
Good enough for me. I won't be arguing.
Oh dear.
Release my friend.
Yeah.
Oh, live on YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
Aye.
It's slightly wobbly on Facebook today, but that's...
What, we're slightly wobbly?
Yeah, it's because it's the technical equipment. I mean,
I think it's the cold.
when you've been on, like proper TV and stuff, it's a bit of a culture shock.
So in our winter series of special
People,
guests
yeah.
who will hog the limelight for the next 2 hours,
I'm no limelight hogger.
you will be.
Oh, needs must.
We couldn't have picked a better guest on a week where all the news has been about women's rugby league.
Oh, I know a little bit. I know a thing or two about it, I guess.
So we should formally introduce you because we were told off last week.
Yeah, we didn't introduce.
We mentioned the words Romeo, but people didn't think we'd introduced him properly.
Mm.
So your CV in women's rugby league.
You still haven't mentioned her name.
Oh well, building up to it. Is amongst the greatest of this current modern era. Current double winner,
Yeah.
England international,
Yeah.
played in a World Cup, thrown Featherstone attackers around as if they were rag dolls.
Yeah. But quite harsh you mentioned that.
Columnist in Forty20 Magazine.
Yeah, I quite like that one.
The great, the one and the only, Danika Priim. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you.
And if you regale even half of the stories you did the other week, some of which you can't,
No.
browse in the dressing room, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So what happens in the dressing room stays in the dressing room.
Yeah.
People are in for an educational 2 hours, if nothing else.
Well, we could have 2 hours about that, but we'll save that one.
Because we have to present a very sanitised view of women's rugby because everything is perfect, as we know.
Well,
Nothing goes wrong.
There's a few misconceptions, as you can imagine, that people have about women's rugby. Is one, everyone's a lesbian. Just, it's not the case. And I understand why and stereotypes, but, no, we're not all lesbians.
I mean, here we are straight into the programme 2 minutes in, and that's the topic. That's the
No, but
level of debate.
that is a general misconception about women's rugby. That is the first question I get asked every time I mention I play rugby to someone that's not on the rugby scene. The second one is about, I don't really want, it's not very, I don't know how to approach this, maybe I shouldn't, but let's put it this way, half the girls don't even shower. They just get changed and go home.
That's come as a shock.
There you go. They're disgusting. Filth.
Right.
And me and Tasha Gaines want to bring in a fine system for people that don't shower after a game.
So that's every team. That's not just the team
Yeah.
that you play for.
Make sure you say some soundbite worthy things. So when all these people just I don't say rip off. That's the wrong phrase to use. But when people watch this and take some selective quotes, then just be careful.
Well,
Women's rugby league is filth, says former England international. Like that kind of thing.
Why former international? We'll get to that. We'll get to that later when we talk about internationals.
Yeah.
You should be on your way to Papua New Guinea.
No. Unfortunately, I think my international days are done. I think they're going for a much younger model of squad now, which is understandable. I think they've got a little bit of experience with Rugby and Amy Hardcastle, Jodie Cunningham in the ranks still. But yeah, generally they're going for a nice younger model.
So what are the misconceptions? Let's get those all out of the way at the beginning.
That we're all big drinkers.
Some of you are.
Whoa,
Let's
whoa.
be honest.
I'm gonna.
I just said that people think that all women rugby players are big drinkers. I didn't say that some of us are not.
Judging
Okay.
by I don't follow every single women's player on Instagram because that would look very dodgy, and I don't know able.
But why would it? Do you follow
that.
every men's rugby league player?
No, that's all right then. But thank you for that defence there. I'll use that.
Yeah.
But the Instagram stories are sometimes very interesting. It's a good job you're not filtered like the men are. Yes.
Well, you have to be careful, don't you?
I forget you're here as 4020 Magazine columnist, aren't you? I forget.
Oh no, not anymore. Not anymore.
No, when you're on the other side, and you can say whatever you want.
Moving on. No. It's yeah. So
it's all right. Not all of you are big drinkers, but a proportion of.
Well, in all honesty, like during the season, we can't be because we play Sundays. So at Leeds, we sign like a contract, even though we're not paid or anything. We sign like a player contract, which is set in standards, which is no drinking 48 hours before. So if you play on a Sunday, basically that's your weekend. So unless I pack in my job and become a weekday drinker, then I don't really get much chance.
See, people talk about the sacrifices you make.
I don't actually like the word sacrifice because it's a choice, isn't it, when it comes to for the rugby.
So people who say sacrifice are just people who want to get sympathy then.
Well, I just think it's quite a strong word, isn't it? It's a choice you make, isn't it? You choose. You make a choice. So like things I've missed weddings, or my best friend got married in Gloucester the day before we played Wigan in the last game of the season, and I chose to drive down and to not drink and to drive back up in the horrible rain so I could play, and that was a choice. I could have had a really nice time at my best friend's wedding, drinking and carrying on, but I made a choice, so depends how you see it, doesn't it?
Side before self.
So what are the misconceptions? Let's get them all out of the way.
I don't really know now. Lesbians, drinking, showers.
I mean, that's a hell of a list so far.
Oh, yeah. We play the same size pitch. It's full contact. We play with the same size ball.
Same number of minutes.
Same number of minutes. Although the Australian women do only play 60.
Would you prefer...
Although
No,
the test match was 80.
Yeah. Good.
Because
in
there's
the women's
no standard
NRL,
rules. Yeah.
it's 60 minutes. And in the State of Origin, it's 60 minutes. I don't understand why.
Because one of the reasons we were told for bringing the fewer number of interchange in the men's game was to increase fatigue levels. So surely playing over 80 minutes.
Well, I think as a team for Leeds Rhinos, we've always won our games mostly in the last 20 minutes because we're fitter. So had they only been 60, I don't know if we'd have got the results we've got this season. But no.
Some clubs
Good job there isn't a World Club Challenge then. Played over 60 minutes.
Well, I mean, now Brisbane are very good. So actually that would have played in our favour.
I remember when we were talking about a World Club Challenge earlier in the season, that talk seems to have gone a bit quieter.
I know, I wish somebody'd kick up a stir about that we should be equal. And I don't mind going to Brisbane.
You'd make that sacrifice.
No, I'd make that choice.
You've mentioned the E word, and it's an interesting one because all sport seemingly is dealing with this at the moment, the issue of equality. Mm-hmm. And people get bogged down with it because they think what people mean by that is that the number one player in, I'll use football because it's the obvious example, the number one player at Manchester City women should get the same amount of pay as the number one player at Manchester City men. That's not what equality is it? Or is it?
Well, no, because I'm probably the worst person to speak to about this, in the sense that I know that rugby league is a bit of a it's a challenge, isn't it? We need to find some funding for any level in rugby league, and that comes from endorsement, sponsorship. So until somebody goes out and finds us the sponsorship, like we've got Bretford now, I'm sure that next season things are going to change dramatically. With the money that put in, apparently the Sky figures have been, I'm waiting to hear from them, but apparently the Sky figures from our final were fantastic.
Well, I understand from two different sources
media correspondents
that they were around or upwards of 100,000.
Which is...
So,
which is more than comparable with a standard men's Super League game.
So then, does that therefore... Because that basically was Sky testing the waters, wasn't it? Whether it was or not, they were testing the waters and seeing whether it was worthy of. So what's their level on? Because all we need now is Betfred come on board, we've got Coral for the Challenge Cup. Will Sky show more of our games, whether it's once a month? I don't know, when we do it as a curtain raiser to whichever men's game is going on Sky, so there's no extra costs. you know, and we do it
Well,
that
that would
way.
be a very clever idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And then that's more, that's more revenue, isn't it, for the women's game, and therefore more money coming in. We can't steal from the men's game because essentially we need the men's game to do well in order for the women's game to do well.
But what we have seen this week
Mm-hmm.
are two very interesting stories about the changing dynamic that's coming up with the World Cup
Yeah.
in 2021. So there is going to be pay parity,
Yep.
an acknowledgement that the wheelchair and the women's should stand alongside the men's game.
Mm-hmm.
But also announced today is that there is now going to be a greater gap between matches for women, so
Yeah.
more chance to prepare. That means that the tournament's now going to kick off at Headingley a little
Yep.
bit earlier. Both of those things are really important in getting to where you say, obviously we might be at a point where parity is worth talking about.
Like that whole gap between games is massive. I remember we flew out to Sydney. We flew out Friday night and landed Sunday morning. Sunday morning we went straight to Manly for a camp, stayed there, and then the Monday moved to the World Cup camp, which was in the Olympic Village in Sydney, played on the Thursday, and then played on the Sunday, played on the Wednesday, and then had a slightly bigger gap from the Wednesday to the semi-final, which was the following Sunday. So we'd gone through all our pool games and semi-final, in just over a week.
Which is ridiculous.
Oh yeah, so by the end of the week we were struggling. And I think that's where, with the whole younger, having a younger squad, I guess younger bodies get over that a bit quicker. And there must have been 6 of us over 30. And as much as I hate to admit it, it does take a little bit longer to get over. And the level that you're playing at and the speed of the game and the size of the athletes in the game, it hurt, it took its toll. And we had a doctor, we had a physio, but and every now and then we had the World Cup sent their masseuses in and stuff. It was great, but it was a real manage yourself and in between that you had to do some analysis, you had to train, you had to have a rest day. So it was a real struggle. I remember we flew out the 10th of November, I think, and we got back at the very start of December. We're out the whole time, and we had 2 afternoons off that whole time of no rugby. 2 afternoons we were allowed to take our kit off and just wear what we wanted and go out without being supervised. So it was quite intense, and it had to be because of the turnaround. So that's going to make a massive difference to the girls.
In terms of standard, I think there's
Careful.
there's 3 things. The first is what's happening here has been a quantum leap.
Yeah.
But we've just watched the Gillaroos play the Kiwi Ferns. They're doing it slightly differently.
Yeah.
Very short seasons, very intense, small number of teams. How hard is it going to be for us to catch up, bearing in mind that they're moving forward probably even quicker?
Yeah.
That
it
would be the first thing.
It was a 2013 World Cup where there was not much difference between the teams at all. And it's still a bit contentious, the fact that Australia won by default, by refereeing, by decision, whatever. But England were the better team playing them in 2013. They go back home, they go professional. Or they start professional, so they start with a few contracts, they start with the clubs coming on board, they start becoming like essentially the Super League NRL setup. Fast forward to the 2017 World Cup, the jump was just so ridiculous that we could see that, and then we thought, right, we've come home. Skill-wise, we're not too far, but their speed and their fitness was completely out of this world. So we thought, coming back from the 2017, then we started all this Super League and everything like that, we thought, oh, by the next World Cup we might have caught up a little bit, but then you see the rate they're moving, and yet our game is moving massively, but where we thought we might be after the 2017 World Cup in terms of a couple more professional contracts, maybe not so.
I feel if only we had an extra £200,000 we could spend on things. So,
Well, but that's it. The women in Australia have a 4-week season, add a couple of weeks on for the state of origin, but yet paid to train all year. So, but if we were catching up with them, I would be questioning their strength and conditioning and their fitness, managers. So I don't know where that gap is going to start to be bridged until we go professional completely.
without wanting, obviously they only have 4 teams, as you're saying, in the Australian League. We've got 8 at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like Warrington have been promoted. I don't know officially, because nothing's been said. I don't know if
Is
anyone's
somebody
been,
getting relegated?
I don't know if anyone's been relegated.
No.
And you think I should know the answer to that question? I don't know. I only ever ask questions very rarely of the RFL about these things, you see, when prompted. There is obviously a gap between the top teams in the division and the teams at the bottom end. And going back to the point about TV, if I were in charge of putting games on TV, I would make sure those games are, and this is not to the detriment of not wanting to show the other teams, but if you are a fledgling sport, and I know Women's Rugby League's been around for years, you show the top teams against each other because you've got a better chance of the games being better. Are there too many teams in the Women's Super League, or would you work the season out differently? Because obviously they only play a short number of games in Australia. We play a lot more. Would you prefer more games?
Do you know what? It's a tough question because you love playing and it becomes part of your life. And now where we're in the off season and we're not, like some of us not doing international duties, it's a little bit only 2 weeks in and you're still a bit like, what do you do? What do you do with your life?
You go and get a Gregg's breakfast sandwich.
Yeah, before you watch the GB Lions, it was a celebratory one. Thank you. But towards the end of the season, we were ready for the season to be over in the sense that we were all just tired. So I don't know where the fine line is. I don't think 4 weeks is enough to develop us. But then, for that 4 weeks, could you essentially pay the women to be professional and take 4 or 5 weeks off work or whatever it might take, or maybe 10 weeks off, and for that 10 weeks they're paid? Getting sabbatical, I don't know how easy that would be. And then just invest that way. I don't know. There's lots of things to think about, but for our game to grow, we need to keep attracting players, and I don't think that short space of time is enough to attract girls.
I mean, Alan's mentioned, do you not get any money for broken time payments or expenses or anything? I know at least one coach who doesn't get any money out of the game, which is ridiculous. Possibly 2, in fact, off the top of my head, and I'm sure that's probably a common thing.
Yeah.
The fact that coaches aren't getting any money out of this to cover expenses, the players aren't. We are relying on. We're promoting something as this is a new big thing to get involved with.
I think there's a different question. The 4 teams that are clearly the leaders at the moment, and that can change.
Yeah, as we saw between last season and this season.
But they seem to be the ones where the parent club, who are supplying the name, are also given a little bit more. So you've got access to strength and conditioners, you've got access to physio, you've got access to...
much more.
So there isn't payment, but there is a professionalism.
Yeah, I always say that about Leeds. We don't get paid, but we do get everything the men get.
So should, as a condition of being in Super League, every Super League team have a women's team and have that same sort of access to the facilities and the backup that the men have? Would that help?
But then again, we saw Bradford Bulls narrowly miss out on 4th. And we know the answer to that at the minute. I think in order to compete, the teams are bringing in more strength conditioning, and whether it's a student at a university or something like that,
Someone from the army.
Yeah. It's where you can... There's no help in order to recruit anything at the minute, and everything's done via the individual women's clubs on their own. It's not like... I think we're really lucky at Leeds, because our social media, they do everything anyway about trials or whatever it might be. But I know that... Because we've been questioned as to whether we should have our own Leeds Rhinos women's account. No, I don't think we should. I think it's good that we are one club and one team, and that's... I think that's much better than being... I know Cast Tigers women's social media does a fantastic job, but that's one guy who is dedicated to that, and he does a great job of getting things out there. But, where do you recruit this? York have York City Knights name, but don't necessarily have much input from the club. They train at York St John's and they have the kit, but I think that's about it. Featherstone are very well supported and always have been, but I don't think that makes much difference. They've used the training ground, the facilities, the gym there. Wigan aren't that, but they are in the sense that they train next door, but I don't think they have quite the same level as us or St Helens. And neither do Cass really. They train at the the back pitch as you walk in, and sometimes have the gym. But I think we're the most supported club.
Do you think clubs are starting to realise that it brings a different audience?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a...
And that it brings perhaps different corporate opportunities, and that there is a transference perhaps of loyalty, that you might start watching the women's team but you will possibly go and watch the men's team because you get involved in the club as a whole, whereas up until now, even at some of the leading clubs, it's been sort of a bit arm's length.
Yeah. I don't know, because I know that a lot of the men's team supporters watch us, but I don't know what it would be like vice versa. And I think, well, it's an entertaining game to watch. It's an accessible game in terms of price, and children go free, you know. And when we play at Wheatwood, it's a donation rather than an actual fee. So it's easier to watch us, it's cheaper to watch us. It's a Sunday afternoon, so... But we do, you know, at Wheatwood sometimes that place is packed.
Mm. It's a very different atmosphere as well.
Yeah.
There's very little criticism of the referee, very little shouts of get them on side.
It's getting on. There is getting a bit more of it, which I like. You know, that's part of the fan camaraderie, isn't it? But it's been a very polite game up until, I say, the back end of the season. You know, and you've always got your people that like to tweet out, because obviously we only won the Challenge Cup in the grand final because Cass were robbed.
Of course.
You bought all the players. Bought all the best
I
players.
love that statement. I saw that statement. I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
What did you buy?
That's why Leeds men have been rubbish, because they spent all the money on the women.
Yeah, that's another misconception. And that's also another thing when you think about the women's game. Do we open a proper transfer window of... We don't pay, but... You know, if I wanted to now, I could... Well, but if I could just ring up Warrington now and say, I really like your kit, can I come and play for you?
It's almost the same colour, yeah.
No, but they're actual... Look, women like a good bit of stash. Okay?
I think men do as well, to be fair.
Yeah, we like it. We like the stash, and Warrington's stash is very nice. So there's nothing to stop me from saying to my team, thanks guys, thanks a lot, see you later, I'm off to another club. And should that be as easy to move around?
In terms of something else that was a point that I was discussing with someone in Australia today, because we were talking about the women's test. Do we all need to stop comparing the women's game to the men's game? Because they are... It's under the banner of Rugby League, but they are completely different products.
Yeah.
And it might be the wrong way of looking at it, but I enjoy the women's game to a greater extent more than the men's, because it reminds me of why I got involved in watching Rugby League in the first place. So in the sort of the 70s and 80s, there wasn't the wrestle. There was time and space for the people with skill to show the skill that they have. And it was on display a little bit again in the women's test. That, you know, Ali Brigginshaw, who clearly was the person who was dictating the way the game was being played, looked like the great players of any era, because she had, not only did she have the range of skills, but she had time on the ball. And that's because we're not spending a lot of time watching people trying to dominate each other at the ruck. So because they don't play to the same almost nuances, we can never we can't and shouldn't compare the games.
We are a completely different brand though, aren't we? Because, you know, in good old Darwinism, we are a smaller species. We're not meant to be as fast or as big or as powerful, so therefore we have to play our game.
Kiwis.
Well, and PNG. Okay, let's just go. There are some that may be slightly different or more similar, but in that respect, we have to play a different way because we aren't as fast or as strong as, you know, biologically we're meant to be. So it is a completely different game, and I think it is played differently, and I think there's a lot of flair and there's a lot of speed, and the ball moves around, you know, very nicely, but that is because there is time. However, the only time I've seen it, like Ali in their World Cup Nines final, that was the target, wasn't it? The key was just to target her, and she got shut down every time, which was great as in a tactic. But yeah, we're a different game. We're an exciting game, but it's different.
Martin says you need a cushion, Phil. I knew this would happen tonight.
The trouble is, I am the hooker between two props tonight.
Yeah.
Well, one slightly more successful prop than another. I've only got a runners-up medal from the Wakefield Schools Cup in 1993.
It's pretty big time though.
Played at Bellevue and everything.
Well, there you go.
But I was a very bad rugby league player. I think it'd be fair to say crap. Because I struggled to get in the first team at school even when we didn't have 13 players. And as a prop forward, I used to stand out on the wing just to get out of the way.
Don't. I'm a teacher and it makes me feel bad.
Well,
Okay.
I don't know.
No, let's go with the...
Apart from Martin talking about giving you a cushion, there's some interesting comments on social media, as ever. But I'm not going to talk about those. Matty says, I prefer women's rugby league now because it's not robotic and diluted like the men's. It can be very off the cuff and unpredictable. Yeah, I've never seen a bloke push two women over. Two men.
Drop it.
Apologies.
Was it effective or not?
Yeah. I just enjoyed your little run back to the line thinking, and I'm just wondering what you were thinking in that moment.
I don't have a clue. No idea.
Alan's talking about the Brazilians because they're in the World Cup, which is controversial because Fiji are not in the World Cup. I know Adrian Vowles is not happy about that on the social media. I don't know why Brazil are in because I don't know much about rugby league in Brazil. Other than that, I guess it spreads the gospel of the world to another part.
It's
of the,
one of the avowed objectives of International Rugby League. We can't call them the Rugby League International Federation anymore.
No, of course not.
Is to target G20 nations.
Rugby League Convention, as I like to call them.
And clearly South America is an area where they can see growth and quick wins. They've got a lot of women who've played rugby union sevens.
Yep.
So you think they might be suited to nines if you were going to introduce them in the first instance. But
that's what Canada were made up of when they first came to the World Cup. And they didn't do, they held their own in the grand scheme of it, of course against... I'm really upset we didn't get to play them really because I thought that would have been a good game. But, apart from New Zealand and Australia, they went well. And they came out of the woodwork. I think that the World Cup committee are going over to Brazil in December.
Mm.
So, but where have they come from? Because we were talking about this, because obviously Jamaican men have had a big...
Mm-hmm.
And I know that Sophie was like, where's the Jamaican women's? Because she would qualify for that. So she was quite upset.
And she'd play for both,
yeah,
if she could.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a curveball, really. Because I never even heard that they played any rugby league. So it'd be interesting to see how they go. But
I think everyone will want them in their group.
But then there's, you've got France who, by financial, French Federation financially said they couldn't do the Sydney World Cup. They're back in. So, that gives... They're not... we've played them millions of times and had nice, good results past them. So, that'll be a good contest for the likes of Brazil. And be interesting to see how Canada go against them as well. Because I think Canada might edge it. But it just depends who the French bring in, doesn't it?
We are going to talk about the weekend in a bit and all the other news and stuff. We're going to jump around between all kinds of things. Because on the front of the paper, it says, female star retires, which you wouldn't have seen on the front of the paper 2 or 3 years ago. Just look at that. This fell on my head earlier.
It did.
License. This is an old issue of Forty20 Magazine, August 2017, so I don't know which number it is. A Fish and Chip Challenge. Remember that?
I went around for that. Would have done well.
Well,
you wouldn't have won that.
We might have to redo it.
I'm a prop.
Yeah.
And
here we are.
The bigger guys didn't win on the night.
It's a good job I'm not a guy then, isn't it?
Women are better at everything, we know this. Women's sport is on the rise. Can League capitalise on the surging profile? Phil Kaplan chats to Lois Forsyth. Oh, there's a picture of
Who was
Bradford
playing
Bulls.
for Bradford.
What happened to them? And sad news.
Awful. Absolutely awful. Like if any of the interviews this week, Lois's hand has been forced. It's not a retirement. When you get the wonderful comments that people say enjoy retirement, and then they mean well. It's not something that she's chosen to do, nor really wants to do. She had a really tough decision to make, and I know she's been dwelling on it ever since she had her ACL taken back out again. That this whole she can have it redone, but it's not so sure it's going to work. And I think Lois prides herself so much on her ability and her skill, and she's by far the best player in England, and always will be. I think to find a hooker of her calibre her knowledge, her vision, you know, will be a real tough act to follow. But she said she never wanted to come back and not be, you know, her biggest fear was not being as good as she used to be. So yeah, a massive loss to the game on the field.
She was your number 9.
Yeah, and always will be. Always will be. Do you know, she was. I played a bit of Stanley, then I moved to Bradford where Lois was. Played my first international game with Lois at 9. Played for Bradford when she was at 9. Played at the World Cup, she was at 9. Won the treble with Bradford, the double with Leeds last year. She was at 9. You know, and then although she hasn't played this season, she's still been 9, and she's still had that influence. You know, she's coaching Tasha and Kira, and you'll see her on the sidelines, and she'll spot what's next, and she'll say to, you know, she'll say it out loud what option she'd take, and it's just phenomenal. You know, that to have that ability. I wish I had half of it. I think, you know, just to see the vision. But yeah, an awful sad day for Lois, and I know that she'll be around the game for a lot of years, and she will influence so many hundreds of thousands of women and girls and boys. But yeah, just rubbish. You don't want to wish it on your worst enemy, do you?
Coaching material?
Oh, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And she's coming on board with the... I'm not sure in what capacity yet, but she's definitely coming on board with the women's team at Leeds, which will be great, because she's always putting in 2 pence worth anyway, and everyone respects and nobody questions why. They just take it. Lois is speaking, and she said something, I'll suggest it, so you try it. That's how it works. And like I say, she's working with Kira and Tash, and she'll always have that knowledge, won't she? So yeah, I know she's going to Brazil with the World Cup committee in December, so it'll be a nice getaway for her, and hopefully she'll just have a big influence, you know, developing the game. And I know that the BBC would be quite happy to have her as a pundit, so there's so many avenues for her to explore.
Sky could have her as well if they're going to feature.
You know, and that's the
Super
thing.
League games.
Like I spoke to BBC the other week, and they're going to have to start looking at the women's game because it's been covered by the BBC. You know, and whilst that's going on, there's going to be men's games going on, so they're going to need a panel of women's experts, so to speak. And who best to head that up but Lois?
95% of my Twitter, I think, is sarcasm and sideways comments about things people need to read into. But of the 5%, that is genuinely things I believe. When I tweeted last week about how, when we look back in the future, her trying the Challenge Cup final last year,
Yeah.
that will be a moment which will be important, hopefully, for the sport, and they'll go, this was the first one, and now look where we are now. So it's very sad that she's had to retire, but at least she's got moments that people will remember her for.
Yeah, and it's not just those moments. I think she did exactly the same in the grand final for Bradford and Featherstone. The scoreline was not as tight, but I think it was a 40-50 metre break that she made, and the final try of the game. You know, in the World Cup, she, you know, with her position, it's natural for her to set up tries, but set up some really pivotal tries, especially against the Papua New Guinea. There's so many moments of just Lois. I think when we first played, as Leeds Rhinos, we first played Bradford, which was quite a big thing for Lois and myself and Shah and Staves. We played Bradford in the opening game of the season at Odsall, and we tried to push the whole Leeds-Bradford clash back. You know, the pressure that she must have been under then, as captain, as 9, as one of the most influential players, playing against her old side, who she created much of the success for. And that went out there as cool as a cucumber. You know, led us to... She was the reason we won the league last year, without doubt.
I think that was the first club game I saw, was the Leeds Bradford game last year. Because obviously, as been well established, I've only just jumped onto this bandwagon.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because a little bit like Premier League football, which is in fact when football was born. It's when Sky took it over.
Yeah.
In, was it 1995? Nothing exists now before then. It's only ever been Premier League football. With a danger of doing that with the women's game, that yes, it's been Super League for the last 2 years because Super League teams have lent their names to it.
Yeah.
But Women's Rugby League has a much richer history than that, which we're in danger of losing if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of people, again, who've been talking about the games this year, saying, in only the second year of Women's Rugby League, but it isn't, because you played before it was called Super League. Goes back to the...
Yeah, but also that we were at Bradford when Bradford did the treble, which is the only team
which
to do that.
Doesn't get recognised enough now.
No, that was the soft launch of the Super League. So that was a bit like a weird playoff. I think there were 8 teams. I can't remember exactly, but I think there were 8 teams. And you all played each other once, and it was the top 4, or top... I think the year before when it wasn't Super League, it was just the top 6 played the bottom 6. Then they created a new league and it was the top 4 and then the bottom 4. And the top 4 went on to play each other a further 2 times.
This sounds so rugby.
Just like Scottish football.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where the 8s were really invented.
Yeah, it basically was that, but very early in the season. So, yeah, the soft launch of the Super League was the 2017.
But before that, we'd had Bradford Thunderbirds were a...
Yeah, and Thatto Heath were the most successful club.
And even going back into the 90s and international women's rugby league, because I know there's a move at the moment to try and give everybody who's played internationally a heritage number, but the debate is, when do we actually start? But the fact that it goes back over 25 years just shows you that women's rugby league hasn't just happened overnight. The Super League might have done, but we can't forget the history of where we've got to, and some of the people like Brenda Dobeck who built it up to what it is. Yeah,
and I think I get a bit embarrassed when people say, you know, you might not be in the next World Cup or whatever, but you've pushed this movement and you've been... And I'm like, I find it really rude to think that when I have actually watched players beforehand. You know, I watched the 2013 World Cup, which was only 2013, and there were World Cups before that and before that, you know, and there are so many players before that have been get changed in the car, playing a pitch that's not really worthy of being played on, but still turn up every Sunday, you know, and promote it and get it out there. So there's just such a big history behind it with so many standout players. Like you say, Brenda's a massive one, and Lindsay Anfield, who's now... Because Brenda used to coach Featherstone, Lindsay's now coaching Castleford, you know, and dabbled in the whole England. I know she can't make the PNG tour. And there's players like that you think they're actually the real... You know... Well, there's probably, you know, further back than that, but they're the ones that you know, Nat Gilmore, who's got an MBE for it, or whatever it is, you know, there's just so many players beforehand that have put their body on the line for rugby league, so...
Tim's been on. Question for Danika, he says.
Excellent.
Is there a place for State of Origin to bridge the international gaps you referred to earlier? Women's game, very Yorkshire-centric, would it work? And of course, it already exists.
It does.
It does, Tim. I saw it at Blackpool, at the back.
It just wasn't very well promoted this season or last season.
11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
Blackpool.
It was early, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we played the Challenge Cup final at that time, didn't we? As a triple header. It just was really poorly advertised this year for some reason, and now...
Or decided very late.
Oh yes, it was like, the week in the build-up, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't. That's the thing. We got the calendar, and we had Origin weekends in the calendar.
Everyone knew, but it hadn't been mentioned.
But it hadn't been... I don't know if it had been confirmed or not, or whatever it was, but... And then the Origin, unfortunately, I don't know, has turned into... The Super League Origin is very much an England development game, and then there's a Championship Origin, which obviously is a Championship sides. So then there's this gap of women in between, which now I fit into. If I'm not in the international setup, I'm not allowed to play in the Championship Origin. Yeah, I'm not allowed to play in the Super League one because I'm not in the England development squad. And Sophie Robinson and Tash Gaines, there's so many players that are missing out on being put on that platform because of whatever structure that they think is right being put into place. And I understand why. I don't know, is that how the men's work? I don't know.
So here's another question that follows on from that, and about the scheduling and staging of matches.
Mm-hmm.
What is better, do you think, for the development of the women's game? Is it better to have standalone representative games and finals, or is it better to be part of a double header or triple header with the men's? Because the women's State of Origin this year, they made a conscious decision to have it on a Friday night on its own.
Yeah.
Drew over 8,000 fans to North Sydney, and it was promoted as an event in its own right.
Yeah.
Your grand final at a professional ground, we can argue till the cows come home whether it was the right one or not, but you were quite right in saying nobody complains about having to play at Old Trafford, so we'll play wherever, provided it's a prestigious venue. But the debate then started after people had seen such an enjoyable and close grand final. Should it be at Old Trafford before the men's game? Should the Women's Challenge Cup final be at Wembley before the men's? Is it better for the promotion of women's sport that you have your own event in your own space rather than tagged on to a men's event?
See, I'm not sure. Like, I'm really torn about this because the grand final was fantastic and it was a grand final, and do you know what? It was meant to be at Headingley, but can you imagine the backlash that we would have got having beaten Castleford on our home turf?
It should have been at Castleford though.
Well, yeah,
because they finished top of the league.
Yeah, well, that was fine, but in terms of a nice stadium,
Leeds.
I'll move on from that. But then, I don't know if the atmosphere was different at the Challenge Cup, whether it be for me, because I come back from this injury and I played my first final and won it, whether it was the fact that it was a triple header and we were walking then through the stadium or going to get changed and there were so many people saying congratulations or well done, and, you know, just random fans watching the other games, and there was an atmosphere, you know, there was, by the end of the game, 4,000 people. I don't know whether I'm torn. I'm not sure what side I'm seeing, that the Challenge Cup versus the Grand Final. The Grand Final was still very enjoyable, still great, still grand. You know, I say to people that, you know, the first half was a bit slow, but then we had the Sky, so we have the knock on the door from the referee. Get ready, we do the 1, 2, 3 Rhinos. Whatever you do, you're going out the door. Sorry, wait, Sky not ready, and that was a completely new concept to us, but yet really exciting still. Well, we didn't seem to have that problem with the BBC. You know, we didn't know. We forgot that we were. I know it was red button, so I don't know if that's any different or not. But you know, so you had the whole excitement of the fact that, well, and then you're walking around and there's like cameras everywhere, and you're like, well, you know, this is real. This is a real deal thing. So both finals had their own plus points. Nothing to me was a negative at all. Like, I don't have any. I would rather. And I think being at Saints, it was a neutral venue, you know, and end of story for me on that one. That's how it was. You know, Saints could have easily beaten us and played there, and it still would have. Nobody, you know, we're never going to please everybody. This is rugby league. We live off being unhappy about something. So
it's in the DNA.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, when we get onto the men's game, everybody should be sacked for Gregg.
Obviously.
Starting with Wayne Bennett and most of the players.
I said this, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before. When was the grand final? It was 2 weeks ago now, wasn't it? But I said after that, I don't think the women's grand final would work as a curtain raiser at Old Trafford. And that's not to say women can't play at Old Trafford or shouldn't play at Old Trafford. I think almost things get lost. It worked at the semi-finals because you were the first thing on, and then everything was on afterwards. We were at Wembley for the Challenge Cup final. How many people were there for the Sundex 1895 Mega Trophy, media-wise?
Not many, but there were probably in a stadium that holds 80,000 maybe.
No, I mean media-wise.
Well, but there were only 5,000. But, you know, if you're going to play in a prestigious stadium, you need some people in it.
But that's the thing. I think about the Challenge Cup. I think because people were coming in, by the time we'd won, there was an atmosphere.
I'm just more convinced than ever, having made the point earlier that we shouldn't compare the two games. That Friday night where the focus was solely on the women's grand final, you wouldn't have got that if it had been at Old Trafford the following day, and all the reporting would have been, here's what happened in the men's grand final, a paragraph of who won the women's.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh yeah, but, and I don't doubt that at all, and that's why it was really good. And I think, to clarify, it's not the RFL's fault that we don't play a curtain raiser. As much as, you know, not people will defend them, I think it actually comes from, also I've heard several times, Old Trafford's grounds and stuff.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
And that's why they won't let us play before.
But I think as well, even to the point of talking about that representative Yorkshire-Lancashire game, it shouldn't be part of something else. If you're going to have a meaningful game, it doesn't have to be at 11 o'clock before the Blackpool Bash. It can be in its own time, in its own venue, give it a bit of prestige.
I think now it can. After this season, I think there's much more of a product that people will buy into. But you forget that we're still really big rugby league fans, in the sense that playing at 11 o'clock before a big event is still quite a novel experience. It's still exciting. I don't think playing at Bolton, nothing will beat playing at Bolton this season, because of the, you know, we're walking past changing rooms with the likes of Saints and Hull and, you know, and Halifax and whatever it was, you know, and we're still like, you know, and at that moment when you're in the changing room or you're doing the concourse pass, we're on a par. And that's still a real, the Bolton was a very, very good move and a very good idea, and whether it's just the occasion, I don't know. But you're right, I do think the grand final was good because it was standalone. The media was great, the coverage was fantastic, and it worked. And I think now going forward, standalone women's games will work a lot more because we're out there.
People forget how good Sky are at doing what they do. They're not perfect, but they are the very best at what they do. And people.
I also think it's very important that national newspapers like the Telegraph are now devoting whole sections to the women's game, and that they now have correspondents whose sole remit is to cover and follow the women's game. And I think the more you have standalone events, the easier you make it for people like them to cover the sport. And we shouldn't forget that one of the things the men's game can't do is command column inches in the way that we'd like it. The women's game can. It can be anything.
Yeah. Well, this is my point at the start of the season. We, as a sport, should have part of this women's sports pie that has suddenly appeared in the last 5 or 10 years. And why shouldn't we go out and grab it? Because the product is good. As I said on this programme a few times now, we wouldn't say what we say about women's rugby league if we didn't believe it was any good. Here's Graham on YouTube. Why the push for women's rugby league when you're always bad-mouthing men's heartland clubs with poor attendances? What's the average women's Super League attendance? Well, Graham, it's probably not as good as some of those teams in the heartland of men's rugby league.
Don't think the women have had 120 years to get it right.
Here's the thing. If you can't see the way the sporting landscape is, and look at Sky, and this summer they spent most of the summer promoting the Netball World Cup, right? They ain't doing that for Swinton and Batley and Rochdale and Dewsbury and whoever, just to pick 4 random places.
They aren't doing it for Speedway or some other sports.
If you can't see that as a sport, we need to find new audiences and new money and new players, I don't know what I can say. Yeah, of course the crowds aren't thousands of people there. Cats have done very well this year.
They will be.
You know, people who watch it, people need to be exposed to it. And that's part of our remit.
The potential is there.
I've said this before, and we're lucky we have this platform because we can pretty much on it do what we want. You in your magazine, Phil, you put in there whatever you want to put in there.
The nice thing at the moment, and again, I'm not using the magazine for any point other than the fact that when we started out, we might have done, here's a special feature on women.
Yeah.
Now it features within the magazine, might be 4 or 5 times, and because it's integrated and almost seamless with everything else that's going on, be that the Cameroon team getting arrested on the way back from the MEA Championship, the women's sport now is just an integral part of rugby league, and I think that's the way it's going to go, and the potential it's got, the crowds it can get, the corporate support it can get, the funding that hopefully it can get, the coverage, broadcast and written wise it can get, exceed some of the teams that have been around for 120 years in the men's game who have plateaued.
I think, unfortunately,
and that's just the fact of life. It's not a preference of one over the other.
It's just a product of rugby league, isn't it? And I know it's women because women play it and men play the men's side of it, but we don't call it men's rugby league. But we call it women's rugby league, which is fine. But there are going to be people out there that because it's called women's, it has that title in front, whether I sound like a big feminist or not, people are going to naturally put off it straight away, which is fine. And by all means, make your comments and suggest what you want to suggest after you've seen a nice little portion of it.
Me and Phil, big feminists, obviously.
I am. Always have been.
How long have we said, or I said at least, and you've nodded, I think Leeds Rhinos should call their men's team the Leeds Rhinos men. I think they should call the competition the Betfred Men's Super League and the Coral Men's Challenge Cup. Because, 1, what's wrong with that? And 2, no one will use it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But it sounds like...
Yeah, but that's it. Like, it's not about changing there needs to be some kind of difference, isn't there, between the two? You can't just say Betfred Super League, because
that's what they're doing in Rugby Union, aren't they? Calling both World Cups the World Cup, which is ridiculously confusing.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're doing that.
And it is, the women's premiership in Rugby Union is sponsored by different people, so that also helps.
We need a crisp sponsor, we need free crisps.
Well, I don't know, you should have seen the size of the crisps they were giving out when they first came on board as well. They were like Phil-size bags. Every team got.
Nice.
They were like...
Eat your own weight in crisps.
I could probably do that. But I think
That's the
also
next challenge.
yeah. But I think also the great thing for me is that we are sponsored by the same sponsors. You know, like I say about the whole, we are part of Leeds Rhinos social media. We are also part of the Coral Challenge Cup and the Betfred Super League. I think that's much better. Well, I don't know why. I don't, you know, if we got another standalone sponsor that was as big or as influential, maybe it might be different. But I think it's great that we are, you know, integrated as one sport, and so there does have to be some differentiation in that. But I think there's just that, you know, there were mixed reviews on the Grand Final and the Challenge Cup and the league in general, but we're going to talk about this weekend and look at the state of that, and there's not a woman in sight there. There wasn't even a woman in the coaching side, so still can't do a job there, can they?
In terms of another thing that's been integrated, we'll come back to that throwaway.
Sorry.
We've now got a woman of steel.
Yep. Which
again is presented at an awards night that fates the very best.
Yep.
It doesn't feel like tokenism. It's new.
Not
It's only been done
no,
for 2 years. It's a really decent size.
Don't say the word tokenism because we fell out earlier in the year.
There is now a genuine acknowledgement of the best player in the competition that stands alongside the best player in the men's competition. You see them photographed together. You know it.
Yeah.
The person that's won it this year,
Good
someone you know quite well.
Yeah, I do indeed.
Story emerging today that she wouldn't mind playing in the Australian
Using our competition as a stepping stone, Phil.
Yeah.
Would that be a good thing? I mean, a lot of our male counterparts have been proved by playing in the NRL. It's supposed to make Great Britain a force. Didn't quite happen this weekend. Would it be good if some of our top players went and played in that higher intensity of the women's NRL?
This is a double-edged sword for me. So I think it's great, and I think, why not? You're pushing yourself to the next platform, and the NRL clearly is the next platform for us. This actually started out after the 2017 World Cup when Lois Fossell, I feel like I need to curtsy every time I say her name now. Dame Lois, yeah. She got asked to go out last season when we first started Leeds Rhinos for the 4-week block. So it wasn't even the whole season. It was literally, you play for Leeds Rhinos, we'll take you out for that 4-week block for you to come and experience. There was talk maybe of doing an exchange, switch or whatever it is, and go and experience. Now, for somebody like Lois, she would have fit in so well in the NRL when she was playing at the time, and you know, she plays hooker, but then we saw her play 13 in the World Cup as well, so yeah, why not? And Lois, being the most incredibly humble, modest person that she is, said no, because it runs over playoff time for Leeds Rhinos, and I'm their captain, and I need to stick by them. I'm like, as a good friend of Lois's, you idiot. You know, and I was like, she needs to think about yourself, and, you know, and I don't know, things happen for a reason. Maybe she'd have gone out, maybe would she have been injured, would she not? Whatever, things happen for a reason, and now you can say the what ifs, but she said, no, I've got a job to do. I'm the captain of Leeds Rhinos Women. It is our first year. It is playoff time. I do not want to let my team down. Now, had Lois not said that to me, I would have been saying to Courtney, see you later, bye, go. However, selfishly now, Courtney is our captain, and I'm sure will continue to be, I assume, next season. She's pivotal in our team, let's be fair. Like, I'm not going to say, you know, that we don't need her, because we do. Do we want to, selfishly, do I want to lose Courtney, who's our captain and one of our best players, if not the best player now, during our playoff season? But yeah, I want us to go out and play. However, Courtney's got so many decisions to make, because she came over from Australia on a visa that meant she couldn't play cricket. That visa's just changing, which means now she can play cricket. So Courtney's got to think about rugby league in the UK, rugby league in Australia, cricket in the UK. You know, cricket is paid for, so why would that not, you know, she would struggle financially now because she has to miss work on a weekend just to play. So surely the drag for her would be financial stability. And if for 4 weeks Australia can give her that, or for 6 weeks or whatever it might be, why would you not go and do it for that reason? So I know Georgia Roach was maybe asked about it and she would like to do it, but I don't know if things were actually put in place for it. I just know there was talk of it, but Lois was definitely asked and declined. So
Sean's pulled you up about talking about eating your body weight in Chris. Thinks you were having a go at Danika there. I don't think Sean was listening properly.
Oh. Not big girl problem centre. And what? Props life.
Thank you, James, for featuring this. We'll bring out your own range of T-shirts next. Nigel says they should name the Woman of the Match trophy at the Cup final after someone, like how it's the Lance Todd trophy. Whatever.
Yeah.
One of the pioneers, not pioneers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lois Forsell.
That's going to
That would be
it's going to happen.
You
Basically.
well, clip that out and then we'll get people saying,
Well,
well, Bloody Leeds again.
We've
Leeds.
got Sir Kev, we need Dame Lois, don't we?
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, is that what we're starting now?
I think so.
Next thing.
I think so.
We will talk about the Lions in a moment.
I was going to ask you about nines.
Yes.
Because obviously we've seen the Women's World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Only 4 teams, which again I think if we're serious about the nines and it having a World Cup status, we have to have more teams involved.
Yep.
On the men's side, we mentioned it to Romeo when he was sat here last week, that it's a perfect vehicle for developing nations. Yeah. How do you think we went in the nines? I thought we performed admirably against the Orchids.
Yeah.
We then seemed to run out of a bit of steam when we hit the Gillaroos and...
Yeah, it's a tough
Are we
one.
suited to nines? Because certainly in the men's game, I think we had this conversation last week, that we sort of didn't pick tactics for nines.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
like, we've got to have a prop, we've got to have another prop, we still need a hooker. Australia picked one forward and had a lot of versatility, a different set of players and tactics. We seemed pretty much set in our ways. Do you enjoy... You haven't played nines, but would you have liked to have done?
I'm a prop. There's not a chance I would enjoy playing nines.
No,
I played when I played rugby union. I played sevens, and I absolutely loved it. Purely because I think you have, I'm a strong runner, so I have a bit more space in order to run, and it's harder. People have to come in more. I would.
I think you
Oh,
have,
you've
to,
got
you
that
have to get the door.
sorry.
This is your role in that seat.
It's not because you're females, because Romy did last
I
week.
feel like it is because I'm a female.
You actually have to
No,
take. You can't. Brian's not allowed in the room. You see, so
The trouble is, Brian is persona non grata now in rugby league, so we can't let him
I'm
in.
not allowed in. We've got.
I like this mug as well.
Don't.
Wow.
And you can have a biscuit.
No, I'm an athlete, you know.
I know, but
Wait,
you're off
Chris.
soft season.
I know, yeah. Yeah, so now it's a great idea, and I am a bit upset that I didn't get a chance to play in it. I never would have, even if I was in the England the squad now, I wouldn't have been picked because of the calibre that we've got. I think the men's have got so many more players to pick from, haven't they? The pool to pick from is massive, and I think that's where we might struggle, in the sense that we've only got 8 teams in the Super League, or whatever it is, and from them, how many to pick for? We took, like Rhiannon. I didn't know how well she'd go at nines, because she's very much a prop in the sense that she does a really hard graft at 15-20 minutes, then has a breather, then comes back on. But that time she does play is so strong and so intense. I know Shannon Lacey was meant to go out. She's a second row, back row by trade, and she was replaced by Georgia Wilson, who was a winger. So there was no sense, there's no rhyme or reason as their selection there. I think the girls went well. I think the experience of playing, they played in a big venue. They played alongside, either side of the men's teams. I think what we lack in is not necessarily the skill or the ability to play rugby. We don't have experience of occasions. When you've got the likes of Caitlin, who turned 18 when she flew out, Kelsey's 20, Leah Burke, I think she's maybe 20, 21 maybe max. The oldest player that went out there was Amy Hardcastle at maybe 27, is she? I don't know, I think I might be doing her a kind favour there. But, so there's a lot of girls that have come from playing in youth sides to then playing Super Leagues, now playing on a World Cup 9 stage in Australia in a full stadium.
So do we have to have domestic nines to teach
No,
us how to play?
I think so. I think that would be great, though.
Which you you could then sample at least nines.
Yeah, and I think that'd be great.
And there is the space in the season to maybe have a weekend of a tournament of nines to get all the teams together. And
yeah, well, like I think Brad Dwyer tweeted out, doesn't he, about making the Magic Weekend a nines tournament. I think that we could do something similar, a weekend of nines, and we could probably do with, you know, and I think some of the championship teams would do well at nines, because where they lack in the middle, they've got the pace and the youth out on the edges. I know Warrington's edges are ridiculously fast, you know, and even their back row very, very fast and skillful. So I think that there's a real like opening for that, and I think that would be great. I think nines is a part of the game that we can develop, which therefore, like everyone says, if you're not quite ready to play full side 13, which you saw in the Gilliroos and the Ferns, you know, a few days after, which is a completely different calibre of game. It's that good bridging point between the under-19s playing full Super League for all aspects, for men and for women.
And it's another trophy you could play for over one weekend, which is great. Bit of prize money.
Oh, not more lead success.
But you talk about what we need are more events and more occasions that the women can experience, so that when World Cups come around or big stadia come around, what's PNG going to be like? Because apart from the fact that they'll get belted twice by the Orchids, who seem to love the physical aspect of the sport, that's going to be as intimidating an atmosphere as they've ever been in.
Yeah, and I think...
and that's got to be great for them, hasn't it?
And PNG games turn out in their hundreds, don't they, to watch the games?
They'll walk for days.
And the thing is, it's something for them to do, it's entertainment, isn't it? But I think with the PNG side of things, like we saw when the Knights went out last year, is that's just not about rugby, that's a cultural thing. So how good... I know if I went out to PNG, I'd really struggle, because I would care more about the cultural side of things and I know there's times we switch on and off and whatever else, but are our girls young enough not to not care? That's not the right way to put it, but you know, to
appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they would appreciate it, but they're still there to do a job, and I don't know if that's an age thing, or I don't know how to word that without sounding really negative. Do you know what I mean, though? Like,
we don't do negativity. Oh,
no, but like,
you'd be looking for the museums to learn about the culture and the history of the place.
There's culture where
there's levels of poverty, isn't there? And you see like the schooling, and if it's anything like the Knights did, which I hope it is, it's a 3-week tour, so I'm hoping they're going to see a lot of Papua New Guinea, or you know, and I know they've been given the warnings about what it's like out there crime-wise, and you know how dangerous it might be. So there's also that aspect of worry that some of the girls might have. But I think that's going to be such a great test to go out there and play in the heat, play under pressure, play. You know, PNG are a really up and coming side. They're physical. You know, they have got edges that are fast, and where we saw them lacking nines, they've been able to have the proper interchanges in 13s. That is like a solid wall. And even when we played them in 2017, they've come such a long way since then. It will be a real contest for England to see where we stand.
Apparently, you're a low budget Michael Parkinson. Have you got any free Parker
definitely
pens?
Low budget.
Still quite a
big pens.
That's still quite a compliment.
Pens.
I'll take that.
Sure. So we're going to have the Women's Super League Nines actually as a standalone event somewhere in.
I just think that would work. I think that there is room in the fixture list.
Mm-hmm.
That if we're serious about having World Cup nines every 2 years, we've got to play more of it over here. I'm a little bit more convinced at the men's level that it should be international, because I think we've got enough teams. You know, I think it'd be fantastic to have a weekend where the Czech Republic and Germany and Norway and Jamaica all come over, and our top players play in an internationally based competition. But I think for where the women's are at the moment, a domestic club nines over a weekend in a venue that was attractive. So not the ground of a current team, but you know, let's say Blackpool, for example.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't be the Origin game that adds on to the Bash weekend. There would be a weekend in Blackpool solely of women's nines, and every team would play 3 games over the 2 days. So if you're going to support your team, you make a weekend of it. You're there for the 2 days.
Yeah.
And it ends up with semi-finals and a final, and whatever prize money there is goes to the team that wins.
But you forget that we're not even, apart from this World Cup nines, we've never been paid. So it's not even about a participation fee or a winnings fee now. It's literally about the development of our game.
But the World Cup is introducing appearance fees,
But
and
then
winners.
that's from a different pool of money, isn't it?
But I just think that's something we should be aspiring to. If we can't pay you every week, have a tournament whereby there is a small amount of prize money from ideally a sponsor or a broadcaster.
Yep.
That not only do you get a nice silver trophy to take back to your clubhouse, but you actually get a few quid in your pocket as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of still old school in the fact that we need to. I'd rather the money go into the Super League at the minute, grow that, have this as a standalone development weekend. Yeah, more silverware. That'd be nice for us. And then maybe in the next season or the next whatever it might be, then it starts to get more money in. We can't expect it just to be, bam, there's the money, because you need to find, you need to get somebody to invest in that, and it needs to be somebody that's seen the product. The Nines is an unknown entity, essentially, isn't it? Like, we didn't do too badly, considering. I love Caitlin to pieces. She's on my team. Rhiannon's a great player, but I think the standout players for England were the resilient. Emily Rudge didn't take her foot off the gas once. Amy Hardcastle, you can count on. Jodie Cunningham, one of the best fullbacks in the game. And there may be elements that Rhiannon and Caitlin did that were fantastic, and I'll never ever take that off them. But there's women in that go unnoticed because, and it's like when Emily got picked for nominated for Woman of Steel. I was so happy for her because she does that much work. Then, in fact, she's always in the action, so she's never to be seen. If that makes sense.
You get taken for granted because it's assumed that
like James Rowe.
Exactly like James Rowe. Yeah, and that's
you're a minimum of 8 out of 10 every time you're on the pitch, so that nobody ever notices you.
And that's Emily Rudge out and out. And I think she held her own, and she's used to playing against Australia and New Zealand. And I say used to. That's probably the 3rd or 4th time now she's played against them only, and that's when you start getting used to playing, which is ridiculous, isn't it? So she went really well, and she led that team fantastically well, and so did Amy. So we went really well. We developed, it was a development. Emily was very great in saying we're not where we need to be. However, this has given us a stepping stone of, helped us towards not only seeing where Australia and New Zealand are, but also they're going to take that weekend and put it into 13. So they're going to feed back, and Craig Richards said, coaching wise, we did things wrong, and I think that's such a hard thing to admit, but a very good thing to be able to do as well. It shows that as a coach you're willing to make changes. So yeah, it will be good to develop it. They went well, they held their own in some respects. They're going to use it as a tool of development, which is, if you learn from something, it's never a bad thing, is it?
So you mentioned Craig Richards, and we'll talk about Wayne Bennett in a minute and the men's Great Britain performance. Craig doesn't coach a team in the Super League.
He is linked with St Helens,
but he is the performance coach and he is the Great Britain coach. Whether he is not questioning his ability in any way whatsoever, do we need somebody who is part of the week to week ongoing competition to be the national coach, or is he? No,
I think the only downside to Craig is the fact that he's linked with St Helens, so therefore he will see more St Helens games than he will do. Whereas Chris Chapman, who was the coach beforehand, he was never linked to a side at all, and he didn't coach within the Super League or the women's game. He was just the England women's coach. But every weekend, he would get round to a different game. He would also go watch championship games, and that's where Danielle Anderson first got her shot to come into. She came into the England camp probably 10 weeks before the World Cup, and she was playing at Alton Raiders then. But he went out and spotted her, and look at her now. And I think I much preferred that fact that there was somebody neutral on the side of the pitch. And even if, when we were in the development squad, even if he wasn't watching our game, you would have to, by the end of the Sunday or the end of the day you played, send a message with, here are the things I did well, here's something I need to work on. And he would then talk to your coach about if that's the right. It was all about identifying your strengths and weaknesses, which I think is a great tool, and it's very difficult to do. it's horrible, isn't it? There's not many people that like going, I was really good today at doing X, Y, and Z. You always want to focus on the negative, but Craig is an unknown entity in the sense that he hasn't coached at all in the women's game. He was manager in 2011 of the England women's students team that went to France, which is way back when, obviously. It's 2011 or something like that. So he has dipped his toe in the women's game, but that's it. So who knows?
Here's Paul. This is like a conduit for me to flag something off, so it's good. What about getting a few women's games onto free sport? No, Paul, there's no point. No one watches free sport. The key is BBC and Sky. And hence why...
So if I were to give you...
When we got the Women's Challenge Cup final on the BBC 2 years ago online, where it's all gone from there.
If I was to give you a ball into an opening now, so that you've got free rein to go the length of the field.
Yeah.
What about our league?
Well, the Our League app, it's interesting. They sent out this press release last week, the RFL. RFL and Twitch celebrate 2019 success because loads of people watched on Twitch. Oh, you're there, look. The other week
leading the singing.
The other week in the paper when they were talking about the comments of somebody about the Challenge
you
Cup
were
final,
the
you were blurred behind.
Yeah, apparently so. That's what happens when you get excited.
And you wasted champagne.
No, I didn't.
There was lots of it being sprayed.
And there was a lot of it not.
Was it champagne?
Too. It was something.
Some cheap sparkling wine.
I remember having my best friend Kim, bless her. She'd driven over. She's a teacher. She'd driven over from Yorkshire on a Friday night to watch the grand final with nobody. Didn't know anybody in the audience. Had no friends with her. Just came to watch me. And I carried the champagne bottle over, and she looked at me, and we went to university together. And she just was like, "We've got an unwritten rule," and she just went, "See it off." Half a bottle of champagne later, and that was the decline of my night.
That's when you realised it was Wednesday.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. But yeah, there was not much wasted.
No. Before I forget, have you all had your tattoos yet, or is that still to come?
The new ones?
Yeah.
No, not the new ones.
Will it say Dame Lois, your new one?
I might have to now. I might just get Lois's name tattooed on me anyway.
Back to the Our League app, which is a wonderful thing.
We digress.
I think people would rather talk about women rugby league players wearing tattoos. I'm going back to the start of the programme again. So the Our League app, which is wonderful, of course, and we all love it, has 120,000 members, it says here, on this press release from the RFL. Bizarrely, when you're sending out a press release and you talk about how great things are, and you say that over 30,000 people watched Oldham versus Newcastle on Twitch, and 15,000 people watched the women's grand final on Twitch, and thousands more on Sky, when you know it was in the over 100,000. There's a number you can throw out there which is not untrue, and you put thousands. Why underplay something? This is the comments of Mark Foster, the IFL's chief commercial officer. He says, "It is having the Our League app that gives us content to broadcast through completely new communities such as Twitch." That's true. That AB Sunday's 1895 Cup semi-final between Lee and Widnes gave us a season's best viewers for a club match, and I've missed out the number. Can you have a guess at how many people it would be?
I know, so I can't. But
I don't even know where to start guessing.
Exactly. Well, it's 120,000 members of an app. The biggest figures for a club match on Our League. I'll put you on the spot. I should do
70,000.
you see, that's a reasonable guess.
that. Sounds like a lot of people, doesn't it? Well, 70,000 people.
But I'm just thinking of the 120,000 and how many were at Wembley and therefore not watching.
Well, no, this was the semi-final then. This was the semi-final. Even so, that's
it's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah.
If you had 70,000 people watching a game, you would definitely tell people that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You'd say, "Oh, we had 70,000 people on our app." If you had 7% of that 120,000, or 8,399, I'm not necessarily sure I'd be shouting about that.
No.
Because when you think of television and how much it costs to make things, now I go back to the Challenge Cup final again that we did, because I was part of it and I know how much I got paid. I am assuming that people who currently work on the Our League app who present things on there may get paid more than I did, because they're more experienced in things. But I don't know. Freelance camera people get 200, 300 quid a day.
There is a cost.
plus everyone else you need to have for these things. A lot of money's been spent producing games for the Our League app. Some of which I'm not sure why we're spending money on, and not to denigrate.
But it's the future of how the RFL might be gaining their income.
But how are we?
Which is a worry.
How are we going to monetise, for instance, Cumbria under-17s versus Yorkshire under-17s? It's almost as if we've got something and we think, oh, I've got this thing, we need to fill it with stuff. Leeds Rhinos women, you did a quiz on your website. I didn't do very well on it.
I didn't do very well on it.
Despite being, of course, one of the Leeds Rhinos women's #1 fans. But one of the things on there was the how many people watched the games on Facebook and YouTube, because Leeds stream them as a club, which is great. And all teams should do it. I'm not sure why they don't. And it worked out as around an average of 18,000 a game over Facebook and YouTube. I don't know if that's good or not, but it's better than 8,000 people watching Liam Widnes on an app. So,
which goes back again to,
and that's the highest.
The earlier point that was being made. Why do we focus on the women's game and not necessarily some of the more traditional men's teams? Well, that is an indication of the difference in potential. How
those numbers come about, because I know how many people watch this, and I'm sure it's a different way than perhaps people clicking on the Our League app. I'm sure that, you know, when it comes 5,000 people watched last week's show, it's not 5,000 individual people. We know that. But I think we're sport with no money, apart from 200 grand we can use to look after a hole in the floor in Bradford. So we've got no money, but we're spending it on covering games that might not necessarily, I don't want to say deserve, I don't want to take anything away from the players.
What's really interesting,
what people are interested
is that the first game that they've charged for since the Samoa International right at the very beginning, which I think they acknowledged was a mistake, that the first game that they broadcast you shouldn't have charged for, was the England Knights Jamaica game a fortnight ago. But they won't release the figures of how many people subscribed. Which I would say
have to pay for that?
It's the start of the model of getting your electronic season ticket. Because if the broadcast deal that we do in 2021 isn't at the level it's currently at, or it's at a level whereby Super League, who are negotiating it, keep everything and don't filter it down to the Championship and League One, as has previously happened when the negotiation was with the RFL, then the RFL needs to find alternative methods of income. And one of them is going to be, if we've got 120,000 people that have subscribed to our app, how do we turn a proportion of those into people who will pay for an electronic season ticket? The worry is that having done that for the first time, they won't tell us how many people. The cynic would say it probably wasn't very bad.
But then how do you do that? I know, technology and me, we don't really don't like each other. But the Twitch, because I know that Twitch is just a website, isn't it, that you can go on and just search on. If the game's going to be shown on Twitch, why would you then use Our League if you have to pay for it?
I don't know why they put the Women's Grand Final on Twitch when it was on Sky, but I guess Sky weren't. I assume Sky weren't paying anything for it, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, it was a Sky Mix, which is what confused it. We were Sky Sports Mix, which is the free Sky Sports channel,
which is perfect.
Which is well, that's sensible, isn't it?
Yes. Because
a lot more people could watch it, but then those that didn't have Sky could also access it through Twitch. So I teach in a school, and I would say we've got a WhatsApp group, and of the 35 people in the WhatsApp group, 30 of them had never seen a rugby match before. Now my phone was like a hotline afterwards. Everybody had somehow watched or dipped into watching the game, which was fantastic. But that was thanks to Twitch, not necessarily Sky. So I think it's a great, but you can't charge on one and then. So
we've got to be careful about what we spend money on
and which channels we put it on.
As has been pointed out by Jason, there is a difference between how YouTube and Facebook come up with numbers and I'm sure how they are, which I did say, but it's more impressive if you
I watched it 25,000 times myself.
Well, sometimes I have Facebook and YouTube open to make the figures look better. That's what I do with the show at work. Get the advertising figures up. I think Matt Horton's now taking credit. I don't know what for, either the Leeds Rhinos women on YouTube or the Our League app.
I think he's taking credit for drinking beer in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Why is he even online now? I mean, has he not tagged himself in at some pub or some Hobbit
Possibly.
visiting?
Possibly.
What's he taking credit for anyway?
viewing figures.
Oh dear.
What, because people can't see him?
I think because he commentated once or twice.
I mean, I've done that twice this year. I've got to commentate on one of your tries. I think I
You
even
did,
recognised you as well, which was impressive. I can't see the toffee. Do we want to talk about Bradford?
No, we want to talk about Great Britain.
Can I just say all I want to say about Bradford is some of the, again, we're back to the complete emotional blackmail by sections of the media. It would have been a tragedy for the club supporters, the city of Bradford and the whole of Rugby League, says Martin Sadler. Stop with your emotional crap. I just can't have it.
Am I allowed to say I'm slightly disappointed with the statement issued by Simon Johnson?
You can say that.
Because I thought New Broom, not tainted by anything that's gone on in the past, here was a perfect opportunity as the new chair of the Rugby Football League to say, actually, there is a groundswell of opinion and a need for some kind of an inquiry, and even if the odd finger points back at our own organisation, if you have a boil at some point, you need to lance it, and we haven't taken that opportunity.
Well, who could certainly do that? Because they like to stick their fingers into pies that... well, they can't get their own house in order, figuratively and metaphorically, and that is politicians who had the cricket people at Parliament last week to have a go at them for taking money off Sky for showing cricket and not putting it on free telly for less money. In a story which is 3 paragraphs written by 2 people. It says here that Judith Cummings, the MP for Bradford South, as part of her duties with the all-party parliamentary rugby league group, is expected to reveal in local media in Bradford, that's the Telegraph and Argus then, that she is officially backing a bid to bring the Bulls back to Odsal as soon as possible. I would say to the Right Honourable Judith Cummings MP and the other members of the all-party parliamentary rugby league group, do your jobs and actually put an investigation together to see what's gone on here at Bradford. Because all that's going to happen again in 18 months, 2 years' time, is we're going to be in the same situation. And at this point in time, £200,000, which could be spent on anything involved in rugby league, from juniors all the way up to funding development officers or making everything better for everyone, is being spent on mothballing of sites in Bradford for the benefit of one club. Every single club is having money taken off them this year to benefit one club. Why? The politicians like their answer because they're too busy being crap at their own jobs. Speaking of people who are crap at their own jobs, as social media says, ladies and gentlemen, Wayne Bennett, he's rubbish now. Never Wayne Bennett, he won all the trophies. But he's rubbish.
Super coach.
Super coach Wayne Bennett. Here are some people. Keith says, I asked, what would you change? Keith says, the head coach and a couple of players who can play centre. On a similar line, Fat Boy Rob says, go back 6 weeks and pick some bats. Chris also says, get rid of the coach. So England, Great Britain are back. The Great Britain Rugby League Lions, as we have to give them their full title, are back and lost to the ramshackle Tonga Invitational 13, who pretty much all play in the NRL, apart from a couple of them who play over here. And we've brought all these new kits out, and we've gone back to the 1990s, and we've gone back to the 1990s by losing test matches.
We need a sense of perspective.
What?
And I think the first thing we need to acknowledge is that Tonga was superb.
Without a doubt.
And that my reservation about Tonga as they started to come through was that they were a 60-minute team. Mm-hmm. They were a big side who ran out of gas. First thing I would say is they're a very skillful team now. They have got that mix between power and creativity, and I actually thought, and again, you should never judge from a television picture because you don't see the full panoramic view, but I thought Tuilola here was probably the man of the match because he varied the play between the brilliance of their forwards and the skill of their backs. They proved to us, with the way they played on Saturday, that they were worthy of being the 4th ranked nation in the world, that they possibly now should be regarded as a Tier 1 nation. Yeah. I also think that they are physically the biggest team in the world, and if you have your biggest forward go off after 12 minutes, which not enough was made of, and you play effectively with 16 men, so Alex Walmsley has to play longer minutes than he would have done, and not only that, but the guy who comes off has been your best forward all year and just been the man of the match in the grand final, that's going to have a massive impact irrespective of anything else. So I think there are other things we need to talk about.
But then that's what people forget, isn't it?
But that was lost in all of the, it's a disaster for Great Britain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing for me, isn't it? Like, nobody's ever going to be happy with the selection. Nobody's ever going to be happy with the team they put out, the starting lineup, the bench, whatever else. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether he's the best prop in the league this season or not, you lose a prop, you lose a forward. Now, as a prop, and I know I don't play the men's game, but it's the same idea. Our job is to go out for 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe a little bit longer in the men's team now, and put in an absolute performance, blow everything you've got, out the tank, get off, have a break, do it all over again. Now, you can't do that when Alex Walmsley, who we need to remember has come back from a major injury, and whether it's been a season or not, it still takes its time to get back into the flow of it. And he will be looking forward to next pre-season to then feel like he's back to himself, I'm sure. Much like people do after injury. Like Ryan Hall's not there yet, or he's on the cusp or has come back from injury and whatnot. But you lose that ability to have somebody go in and put in a shift and come back off again. And then you have to manage your team much better. After only 12 minutes of playing probably the most physical team in the world, which everyone says we have this whole Tonga International Invitational, they're not, Super League, they're not this. They're made up of NRL players. They're made up of some of the best players of our game.
Some of those players would get into the Australian team without question.
Exactly, and it's just like, if you strip it back and look at who we're playing, and Tiwi played an absolutely phenomenal game, and I think because they are such a band of brothers, when there's this whole sense of, they were in camp together, they might not see each other, but Connie's gone back and he's back with his best mate again, and there's a real sense of, whether it be a family or one big team, they're trusting each other. When they were throwing that ball around for that try, somebody was there every single time.
The difference effectively was that try.
Yeah.
And again, if that had been scored by Australia, we would have been lauding that.
Yeah.
Time immemorial. I think the other thing is they've been together as a team since 2017, so they don't play very often, but those combinations already work. And I think that, the great thing for Tonga was they brought in an 18-year-old at full-back at very short notice, and he was probably the second best player on the field.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Which is great, because what you want is this Tongan the Tonga have changed what International Rugby League looks like, and we now possibly have a fourth team that could win the World Cup in 2021. My worry was that they would, as people like Taumalolo and Fafita retired, who would come in? Well, we've already seen a couple of young kids come in who can play a little bit, which is great. But that's exactly what Great Britain didn't have. They didn't have any combinations. This was the first time that this group of players had played together.
Yeah. And
again, without being critical in any way of individuals, because I don't think you can do that if you're not at the game. I think it's very hard to do it watching a little box in your living room. Two of the players who played in our spine, to me, looked like one had played too much rugby and one hadn't played enough. And Josh Hodgson looked like a guy who's put everything into his domestic season, completely driven Canberra to a grand final, and then had to overcome the psychological trauma of that team not quite winning the grand final. 3 times I think he kicked out on the last tackle and gave away 7 tackle sets, which again you don't really want to do against a team like Tonga. I'm not blaming him for the defeat, I'm just saying he didn't play at a level that we've seen him play all season. And to me, Gareth Widdop didn't look like he'd played enough rugby league, because obviously he's missed a lot of the season with it, but there's no combination there yet.
But then how can you expect an NRL player to play at the same level as, or vice versa, a Super League player to play at the same level as an NRL player? Whether we want to admit it or not, the game is still quite far. The difference is still quite big, isn't it? And we've seen the likes of John Bateman, Elliot White go over there, and they've made a real impact in Canberra's game. But they would admittedly say they've had to step up their game. And I always go back to the whole. When Sam Burgess, years and years ago, when he was 21 years old, went out to Sydney and spent his first season injured because he couldn't handle the physicality and the speed. and thought that he'd just gone from Bradford and whatever else. And that is still the same now. That the speed, the physicality of the NRL will take its toll on you. And that's what you saw. But how can you then expect Hodgson to play alongside, to talk with Jackson Hastings, who I think, when he actually did get the ball...
Did all right?
Yeah.
But he was subservient to Widdop, who clearly was the chief playmaker in the team, which you would be on your debut. But it looked to me as though when it got to the latter stages of the game, Hastings probably should have had a bit more of the ball.
Yeah.
But I thought there were positives for Great Britain. I thought Jermaine McGilvery had his best game of the season. I thought he played at a different level to how he's played at Huddersfield this year. And that might be nothing to do with him, it's just that Huddersfield as a team struggled. But there's clearly something about playing for Wayne Bennett that inspires the best.
But then also he said he came out of the World Cup Nines a little bit disappointed in his performance and was looking forward to getting back to 13s.
I thought James Graham was outstanding on his 50th cap, because he is.
It's James Graham, isn't it?
He is. And again, Bateman, who's had this long season, his stats are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the try scored.
What is he, 22, 23 or something ridiculous like that?
But, hindsight is a wonderful thing. With the knowledge that Thompson would have gone off early, you might have had Darryl Clark on the bench just to vary things up.
But then you don't plan for injury, do you?
You don't.
Which is what people need to remember.
And I just think that we've overreacted to the first time that this... I think there's bigger issues about Great Britain, and that I'm still not sure that everybody out there thinks of this as England. Yeah. We've got the same head coach, we've got virtually the same squad of players.
Yeah.
There's only a couple of variations that are there. Lachlan Coote representing Scotland, and that's about it. Really. That's about it, really. It's England.
It would have been nice to see the likes of Regan Grace. He's had a fantastic season, and he is skillful. He is rapid. He has played really well. And I don't know if it's positionally, but I feel like in the nines, he went well in the nines. He was. Wales' standout player. He's just looked like he had so much more to give, as if he hadn't had a heavy season, which in the forward pack you generally have more of a that's the way that the rugby league is, isn't it? The middles do a lot of the bashing and the backs do a lot of the flying. So I would have liked to have seen him in that, but I would have liked to see myself in going to Papua New Guinea, but I'm not. So the end of story.
I just thought it was a bit of a hysterical overreaction. Great Britain lost, but
it's all Coote and Hastings fault
for international
in Britain.
Yeah, for
like
international
Andrew
rugby
Fafita was born in
league,
Tonga.
I genuinely think that Tonga winning is fantastic for building up to a World Cup. I think the interesting thing this weekend will be twofold. One, to see how England respond to playing a New Zealand team that's Great Britain is coming off a loss. So there's two teams, both with a point to prove. I think the other interesting thing is how will Tonga go against Australia? Can they do it for 2 weeks running? Because the sign of a really good team and a team, if it is ever going to do anything in a tournament, that's got to do it on quarter-final, semi-final, final, is can you back that up? And I think we can reassess the performances for this week when we see how the teams go next week. But I don't want Wayne Bennett sacked and 3/4 of the team sent home. So obviously that'll be an unpopular view.
We haven't had the players that get sent home yet, can we? So place your bets on that one. Terry says no plan B. We tried to match them for power, and then no flair.
But I think part of our problem was not having Luke Thompson for the bulk of the game.
I think part of the problem was who took charge on that field, because a lot of that game, it was the first half was very much middle dominated, but we didn't get much success. There was some very silly errors when the ball did come out, as if it was a bit panicky, because I didn't feel like initially there was somebody taking real control. All that talk between your nine and your halves as to what is going on, and I think they were very reliant on somebody. But when you've not played together, who takes control and where's the confidence in to say, let's do this without it being, like a counteracted by the sides.
When you made your international debut, did it feel different running out there for the first time? Were you nervous? Were you? I
remember it obviously, but it was funny because I hated every single second of it because I let the occasion. And if somebody said to me, jump, I would have just done it, whether that was the right thing to do or not. Whereas in the World Cup, you know, I had a really big influence of knowing my role, and I was so confident with what my role was. If somebody said do this, I would have just taken the ball, and instead of passing it like I'd been told to do, I assess the situation much better, and I know that under pressure my passing isn't always 100%. So why take the risk if I'm not thinking? The rule is if I'm not thinking 80-90% success, I'm going to take the ball and crash it up, gathering players, and that was a difference of in really understanding and not being forced by other players to pass the ball unnecessarily or to be in a position I shouldn't necessarily be in.
So the second time you played, or the third time,
Yeah.
you were more attuned to International Rugby League?
Yeah, so the first tour
So
I did,
don't we need to apply that to some of these players
Oh,
who
without
are playing
doubt,
in their
yeah.
first game, rather than say, right, the first 40 minutes wasn't what I was expecting, send them home?
Well, that's it. Like, do you know what? If that had been the same in the women's game, I would never have played for England again. But it's not just, you know, how many of these men have actually played for Great Britain, and the amount of pressure and kind of the emphasis that's being put on this Great Britain. Who doesn't want to play for Great Britain? You know, we've brought it back in. It's this prestigious team. It's come out of the, you know, of the cupboard, and it's something to really look forward to. You've played for England, but now can you get that? It is that next step, isn't it? What an honour, and like the weight of previous Great Britain teams gone by. How is that not meant to be pressure? And then you're playing against Tonga, and I don't care who you are, you can't help but sometimes be a Tongan fan, especially with their crowd.
Well, that was the thing, that irrespective of whether the stadium was full or not, there were other competing attractions on the day that meant it was probably never going to.
Yeah.
But when you were watching it on television, I cannot imagine what it must have been like to be amongst it.
You could hear
the
it, couldn't you?
atmosphere never lessened. You know, the singing of the hymns, the almost shrieking support from...
I think that was Mrs. Horton.
For every one of the 80 minutes. What, when Jake Connor came on? That must be, again, and until you've experienced it, you can't know how you're going to respond to it.
Absolutely.
And they obviously thrive on it.
Mm-hmm.
I you know, the sippy towel, again, like, you know, you're watching it on telly from 12,000 miles away and you're almost hiding behind the settee. What it must be like to be facing that before you take the first tackle in on your debut. I can't imagine. But I think we're asking too much of.
But it's like, if you think
certain
about
players.
it, Conrad Hurrell is a big fan's favourite over here, regardless of what team you support. He's an absolute cannonball. He's difficult. He makes meters. He puts in big tackles. I don't think he was that great himself individually, but obviously he's on the winning team, so his performance is by the by.
Funnily enough, I thought Conrad had his best game of the year, because the one thing he didn't do was he didn't make a mistake. Whereas all year domestically, for every couple of things he's done that have been brilliant, there's been the odd knock on his own quarter that's put his team under pressure. I just thought he realised he was a late inclusion.
Yeah.
That nothing gave him greater pride
And
to pull on
yeah.
that shirt again, and he was going to do everything he could not to let his teammates down. And I don't know if the stats will say you can
But
read
then
stuff.
he didn't move the ball as much as he could do. His defensively,
Defensively, he was astonishing. He made some good meters.
Yes, but in his
But he
meters
didn't
made,
make a mistake.
he carried the ball like a middle.
Yeah.
He didn't carry the ball like a centre.
But
or
he's
like an edge.
like you were saying, you would have done in your second Test match. He played to his strengths.
Yeah, but then as a centre, is it not your job? If you're on the edge, if you're on an edge, you need to work on them 2-on-1s. You need to work on that last pass, drawing the defence. Your job as a centre is to make the yards and then to get away that last pass.
Josh Hudson's birthday on Thursday. Sorry,
Happy birthday, Josh.
I didn't realise you were in the middle of. But he made 7 kicks. I didn't realise he kicked the ball the most of the England players. But it's
Yeah,
on.
why? When you've got such...
Well, that's the mysterious thing, because he did it in the World Cup as well. I remember watching and thinking, why is he kicking the ball? Not that Josh Hudson isn't a great rugby league player, but that's not what he does.
I don't know
Well,
him
he
as a
can
character.
kick 40-20s.
Is he a dominant player in that respect? You know, for everybody, like, I don't know him as a character. Is that just... So I know in the World Cup, Andrea Dobson, whatever she said goes. She was a captain, but you backed her because generally her decisions were the same with Lois. is that the type of character he is, whatever he says goes type of thing, because that's where he needs to take a step back and go, boys, I need your input.
I was randomly looking for something on Sky on YouTube the other day, and there was a Leeds Castle game from what was Weldon Road in the olden days, with our colleague playing wearing number 6 for Leeds, and someone had kicked a 40-20, but it was before 40-20s existed. It was just a normal scrum. It was very dull. In the old days when Castleford used to wear amber and black as opposed to orange, they're all kicking off because the new kits are out.
It wasn't a Premiership semi-final.
It was just a regular game on Sky. In the old days, it was just weirdly at the end of some video on YouTube I was watching.
So what would you do now if it?
Is that the coach? Bring in Gregg and Gregg.
Wayne's gone. He's put you in charge.
Yeah, you're in charge now. Congratulations.
What changes would you make for New Zealand? Bearing in mind again that they're going through a slightly transitional phase at the moment, and we'll talk about Australia in a minute because they frighten me at the moment. So we're talking about a New Zealand team that we know is coached by Mark Maguire. That makes them generally difficult to beat. They're on home soil, which again is a slightly different proposition to playing in Australia. Their halves have come under immense criticism, but on their day are two of the most talented players that we've seen in a modern era.
Yep.
What changes do you make to the Great Britain team for the test, and will you be up at 4 o'clock in the morning with your Gregg's breakfast sandwich?
Well, Greg's won't be open by then.
Well, you can get it
24 hour
before and
McDonald's.
put it in the microwave.
No. Well, we've got, there's things that's out of our control now. So you've got Jake Connor going to have to come in for Oliver Gildart, which is a shame.
It is, but Connor does offer something a little
bit
different.
But then I don't think it's a bad exchange. Darryl Clark obviously would be. I think he's.
I'd have him on the bench because he gives you an option.
See, I guess he's not much more of a. He's much more of a off the cuff, isn't he? He just plays what he sees. Obviously you've got set plays and stuff like that, but I think he's very good at you've got to follow him and you've got to do what he's a little bit unpredictable in the best possible way, in the sense that he will just see something and go. So I think Darryl Clark would be a good option. He doesn't really seem to tire either, I don't think.
I'd have Johnny Lomax at 6.
Yeah.
Terry's asked if you think the squad is too slow. We have lost the fastest back we had in Gildart, so we will definitely not outpace the Kiwis, says Terry. Slow in the nines.
Yeah, I don't think they looked
Well, that
too
goes back
scary in the nines.
That goes back to Regan Grace.
Yeah.
That maybe one of our wing options should have been an out-and-out speedster.
Well, that's the only thing I would say, and I'm no coach, so therefore my opinion actually is completely null and void. But when you've got the fastest man in Super League, possibly one of the fastest men in the game, he is ridiculous in space. I'm not sure why he didn't. But again, I'm not Wayne Bennett, I'm not, there's various coaches out there, aren't there, that must have... Wayne Bennett hasn't done this on his own. That's what you need to remember. Wayne Bennett would not have sat in the room on his own and got everybody. He would have sat and consulted Jamie Beacock and Watson and Wardy and said... And
Kevin Sinfield.
Yeah, and said, look... And I'm sure that was a discussion. It wasn't just a one man. So stop blaming the one man. He has the final say, I'm sure. But I don't think any coach in the world does everything on their own. So there's a combination of different opinions that have chosen that. And the only one I'm really disappointed in is Regan Grace, but I just think he's class. But yeah, I would have put him, I would have put Darryl on. Lomax's, but then Lomax's size, I went against Tonga, Lomax's size would have worried me. Because I think when he scoops and goes to the middle, he doesn't always make great yards, does he? Because he just gets, he's a bit of a Caitlin Beavers. If you don't get that space, then he's crushed and crumbled. I don't know, where does Blake Austin fit in?
That's true. If you're going to take him, you should play him, shouldn't you?
As James says, if only Tom Johnston was fit. Be back in red, white and blue next year. That's the only red, white and blue that matters.
Don't know if Germans are allowed to play for Great Britain, are they?
Andy says, Ratu, get him in. We said we should have taken him to the nines. We said that on this programme. He's probably too busy with the army these days, but there you go.
So just moving to Australia.
Oh, yes.
I felt, and not alone in this, isn't a unique thought. I think we all felt that when their 4 future immortals retired, this would be a very good chance to not quite say they were vulnerable, but to bring them more into the pack, because all of those 4 players were in the spine of the team.
Yeah.
They all played together, most for club, all for state, all for country, over a long period of time. You thought, thank God we've seen the back of them. You know, if Slater and Thurston and Smith and Cronk aren't playing, somebody else has got to have a chance. I looked at that Australian team, a very young Australian team with a number of debutants in it, and thought, they're playing differently because you can't replace the irreplaceable, but unfortunately they don't seem to have lost anything.
Do you know, I think
it's frightening.
Flair's not the right word, but the youth of the Australian squad, and not flair's not the right word, but it's just, there is something, you know, you've got some greats here that we know how they play, so you know exactly what's coming. You can't, you know, you can analyse it and you can kind of be in a position to think, well, this is how they're going to move the ball around. Whereas I think with what's coming up and coming now, and particularly the way the NRL has gone, it's that unpredictability of they're so talented that they can do anything. They, under pressure, you know, we've not just got specific players in roles now where the winger just catches and runs. That's not the case now. Your winger can now play full-back, can play centre. You know, you've got centres that can play in the second row. You know, their adaptability is just, that's what's worrying. You know, whereas I don't think we necessarily have that.
Their supposedly junior team, although they shouldn't really call them junior Kangaroos, played France the night before. And you looked at that team and thought, if that had been the full Australian team, it still would have troubled the Kiwis.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the likes of David Fafita, the other David.
The other, not the good one.
Who's still a teenager. And you think, Payne Haas, who came off the bench, who is also a teenager, and did ridiculous minutes and made unbelievable inroads into, you know, the Kiwi strength is the size of their pack. He made them again look ordinary. You look at what Damien Cook's doing out of dummy half, which is completely different to the way Cameron Smith plays, but it's now giving them a different dimension.
Is that, you know, were we thinking that they were, because we're so used to this, like you say, the spine, the backbone, the real structure of that Australian squad, not predictable, because they're not predictable, are they, but we know how they play, was that the thing that we thought was going to make Australia vulnerable because they've played the same way for so long?
And that when it got down to the final minutes of the big games,
These
all of them knew
what to
the
do.
Option to take that was going to bring victory, because they'd done it so often.
But then, with the youngsters playing alongside them, they have played, you know, when you've played alongside a great, you take your own skill and your ability is, and you mix it with somebody who you've essentially been mentored by, haven't you? Imagine having elements of each of those and your own. That's got to be a concoction of something great anyway.
Well, you looked at Gregg Inglis and thought, there won't be another centre like him in this current era. And then he retires and Latrell Mitchell comes along and you go, that's Gregg Inglis, only younger. And you look at Josh Addo-Carr and we talk about the speed of Regan Grace. You just go, if I had any opportunity just to get the ball to Josh Addo-Carr, I wouldn't be following him. I'd just be going and standing where I go when the opposition kick off to us. And I think it's frightening coming up to. I think it's two things. One is it's quite frightening because they're still going to be favourites for the next World Cup, and I'm desperate for them not to win it. But the other thing is, on a positive note, the thought of seeing this Australian team play here next autumn in 3 tests against England is really exciting.
What Australian test series?
I wish I could go and buy a
What
ticket.
Australian? We can buy tickets for the Challenge Cup final. We're on cheap today.
I just wish we knew where they were playing and I could buy you a ticket. If I could buy a ticket today, I'd buy us all a ticket. Sadly, we can't.
Well, one of the big issues, of course, coming up against the Great Britain versus New Zealand Test match is how Great Britain, faced down the haka. Now, obviously, me and Phil didn't watch whatever else has gone on this weekend because we're, dying in the wool. We don't know. accept anything more than 13 players on a pitch. Especially not those two.
Broaden our horizons somewhat.
Well, those two trundling blokes they have there. I've seen that big fat bloke friends have. But obviously, there's major headlines made by England standing in a V formation to face down. To be honest, I'm sick of the haka because in the era of social media, it seems that someone makes a cheese sandwich in New Zealand and they do a haka for them. It's all over the place.
Whoa!
That's what they do. It's like, oh look, you've graduated primary school. Have a haka. So what they do.
That is savage.
It's true though. You look at
It's
social
a
media.
cultural thing.
Yeah. It's great when you see it once a year, but when you see it every day, it lessens the impact.
Have you seen that well, obviously we're talking about the 15-a-side, that France did a similar thing.
They're the French, aren't they?
No, but they've been fined. They got fined by the International Federation.
International Rugby League.
Well, whatever it is in union now. I'm too far gone out
World
of it.
Rugby.
World Rugby, yes, that's the one.
Brackets, sick. Close brackets.
Who's put 50p in you today?
He's like this everywhere. He's like this everywhere.
Anyway, so yeah, they're under investigation now as to whether they...
I love it. I thought the Sippy Tower was fantastic. I enjoy watching the haka. I think, when Jared Warrior-Hargreaves leads it, I'll be frightened.
Yep.
I think it's why we love international rugby.
What's the Tongan one called? Is that still like what?
That's the Sippy Tower.
Is that the Sippy Tower?
And
then the Cook Island one?
Oh, they're all slightly different.
But what are they called? Like, I just refer to them as a haka, which is...
I think it's...
The two things that I loved this weekend were, first of all, getting up early morning to watch International Rugby League, because that reminds me of your childhood.
Yep.
In the days where there was no morning television, and this isn't just being old, it's like...
Bread was delivered by a
yeah. You got up before the milkman. But getting up early in the morning to see your team playing across the other side of the world. And I think it was the 84 series was on ITV?
Possibly.
Fantastic. It was stuff that you only got to see very rarely. That felt great. The other thing was on Saturday afternoon, watching the World Cup qualifier between Spain and Ireland with a Spanish commentary.
Can you not potentially Brazilian for the World Cup? Because you can switch nations. You can do that. It's easily enough done. We'll give you a
yes. Have you got any other heritage that you could count on?
I think if I go back on my dad's parents, my grandparents, I think there's some link with Canada.
We'll try it.
It might be a very loose link. But
you could be a Raven.
Having said that, the women's Canadians in our last World Cup looked like they were having the time of their life.
So we're going back to the
so you'd fit in perfectly.
Well, I'm obviously very professional when it comes to rugby.
Cultural officer.
Yeah. However, they looked like they were there. They were there for a good time, not a long term.
Apparently, the Cook Islands haka is called a haka, but that's just Wikipedia, so that might be wrong. But you know.
One's a civvy tow, one's a sippy tow. I think, is it Samoa is the civvy tow, and anyway, I love them.
I do.
I can't get enough of them. I think you're wrong.
And I think it's having been against them in the World Cup, Cook Islands and New Zealand, it's a sign of respect, but also it's that moment where, is it just a cultural kind of dance where you just respect the culture? Is it meant to put fear into you and but you spend that time as a player? I think it's a great energy to feed off, and it's great to watch. So there's one part of it that there's on the pitch, like with your teammates going, "Wow, this is so cool," with the others going, "Nope, switch on. I'm not fazed by this, not a problem."
But you also realise that you're playing in something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely.
You may only ever face this a couple of times in your life, so it's fantastic.
We got told off. In 1990s,
we got told.
Yeah, went on a school trip to watch the North of England versus the All Blacks at Anfield. So
was that the game that they won?
No, they didn't win this one. This was a school trip because we were a rugby league school, but the head of games was a union person. So we had a school trip, and mainly people went on this school trip because it was during an afternoon, so we had time off school. So I hated school. So we've got to go to Anfield, and we got told off for throwing bog rolls at the pitch while they're doing the haka. We're sat, imagine my secondary school.
That is awful.
Yeah, but we're a rubbish secondary school in Wakefield, and we're around all these posh kids because it's England Rugby Union. Looking for Will Carling and stuff, but he wasn't there. Very disappointing. People get very upset because people send out tweets saying good luck to England. And what can you do?
Good luck.
Yeah, they might win, they might lose. Battle of who do you like less, England or South Africa?
Well, I'm going to be very controversial on a rugby league show here and just say I'm getting up very early and I'm going to be watching it, and I might even dig out of my cupboard somewhere my rugby union stash that I have from yesteryear.
As long as
is that money from a boot?
As long as you get up earlier than that to watch Great Britain against New Zealand at 4 o'clock in the morning.
See, 8 o'clock was reasonable.
Yeah.
4 o'clock is pushing it.
That's a good time to be coming in.
I finish work at 2 a.m. on Saturday morning.
I'll be coming off. I'm actually on a residential for under 12 rugby league girls from Wednesday to Friday. So I think Friday night I'll be rocking in the corner.
By 4 o'clock you'll be ready.
I'll probably be asleep by 7:30, 8 o'clock on Friday night. So to be fair, 4 o'clock might not be that much of a. And then I can literally go from the Great Britain game straight out to a World Cup final.
Well, I'm thinking, because I finish work at 2 on Saturday morning. Is there going to be anywhere in Leeds that's going to be open with it on? So I don't go home and I can just watch that and then go home afterwards.
No.
Tweet in if you know that there is.
Because
I'm going to put an edge of my bets there and say no.
I thought Leeds is this 24-hour metropolis of culture and stuff.
It has to be significant, a sporting event, which...
Well, Great Britain versus New Zealand.
We think it's very significant, don't we?
But we haven't seen New Zealanders play against a team that are mainly English for at least 11 months. At least it didn't in the middle of the season this year. Now, of course, that's what we've missed out. We haven't had we lost to Tonga because we didn't play a mid-season.
We didn't lose to Tonga because we didn't play a mid-season international, but it's another reason why we should have played a mid-season international.
But then why would we play the mid-season international when it's not going to be the England squad, it's a Great Britain squad?
The more internationals that you can play, the better.
But then you're still not playing with the Great Britain squad, you're playing with the England squad, which this is not.
Good point. But I still think we should play more international games.
Should play more international.
Because that squad mentality.
You just need to get used to playing with people. That's what you used to do. Get used to playing with the different squad, isn't it?
As we come towards the end.
And if we were serious as well about development for Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, that would give Great Britain a greater kudos when the squads are picked.
Greece versus Scotland this week, Friday night. Scotland win. They're in the World Cup for definite. They probably are anyway. Bring back Danny Bruff. Scottish.
And Spain against Italy.
Spain are an interesting team to watch.
Spain have improved. I was impressed.
Some people criticise the fact that they're in the World Cup qualifiers, but as we always say at this point, who are they supposed to play against? They've got to play someone.
I think if you looked at the Spain that played Ireland, bearing in mind that Ireland scored 4 tries late on in the game to inflate the margin of victory, there was only 10 points between the teams with 65 minutes gone. That is a much improved Spain from the Spain that has previously played. And again, it's the value of playing nations that are stronger than you. And the more you can do that, and I think you'll find that if things go to plan next year, Spain will get some more fixtures that will test them, and the more that they get that, the better they'll become.
I think Danika's colder than Romeo was last week.
Called what?
Colder.
Romeo was still thawing out. He sent me a text from Canada. He went to Toronto from here, and I sent him a message saying we'd had some great feedback from when he was on. He said, "That's good, I'm still thawing out. I've been in Canada for 3 days."
That was one of the coldest games of rugby league I've watched for a long time.
Well, the steel band were great.
Brilliant. And not only was I spent the whole time dancing to the steel band throughout the game, which kept me a little bit warm, I went to school that week and a woman came in to teach us how to play steel pans.
Fantastic.
I was in my element.
Fantastic.
If you had been like
I'm
that when I was
practically
at
Jamaican
school,
now.
I might have enjoyed it. Well, we'll get you.
Well, that's another
World Cup
nation you can play for.
Well, no, because as Sophie has complained about, there isn't a Jamaican women's team.
Set one up, yeah.
I don't even know how you start going about that.
Well, just
Excuse
find
me,
some random
anybody?
people. Say, are you Jamaican? Have you ever had some reggae yourselves? Come play.
Meet us on Roundy Park after the Rugby Union World Cup final. We're having our first training session.
Right. So many Jamaicans out there meet at Roundy Park. I can't say I'll be there depending on how well England do.
Not cold it is.
Also, yeah, if it's anything below 10 degrees, then see you later, bye.
Do it in June. July.
In
August.
in Kingston.
Yeah, you send me out to Jamaica and I will go set you up a
Have you
team.
seen the budget for this programme?
You could eat it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or not.
I think I had a million things I was going to ask and I've forgotten all of them, so never mind on those. We'll do it again sometime.
Anyone on social media want to
usual stuff.
ask us anything?
Terry's been very complimentary about women's rugby league because he's been watching Cast for 50 years and said he's had more fun watching the women this year than the men, which I don't know if necessarily.
I don't know what that says about the men, but congratulations
We've got
to
some
the
new
women.
kids there. How the hell did you go from being a dancer to an international rugby league player?
He waits till the very last minute of the programme and asks you.
I don't even know.
It's just because you mentioned dancing in the stands there, and I just like.
Yeah, I was classical dancer, ballet, tap, modern. Then went to university. Didn't fit the mould of the dancer, funny enough. Was a very pretentious group, and I thought, I just want to be here for the fun of it.
I
So
can't
instead-
imagine art students pretentious. He says
Well.
with a BA honours. 2-1.
Well, try and be in a group of dancers.
I don't think I want to fit in, to be honest.
Well, I didn't. So taught dance for years, and then went to university. Taught dance to get through university, and Zumba and such like. And then somebody said join the rugby team, and it was only rugby union. So I was like, whoa, what is this? And somebody said catch the ball and run as hard as you can. And as soon as you hit the floor, let go of it, which is rugby union. And then played that, hit and miss. Played for my local club in West Park, and then 2013 was league got interested about the about playing in the World Cup, but I snapped my ankle, and then forgot about rugby league because obviously I was how dare I think about the other sport, and then February 2015 got a phone call saying do you fancy it? Don't be ridiculous. I've been looking at you for the World Cup in 2017. Where do I sign? And I've never looked back.
These snapped ankles, the bad things. But sadly, I never got to play in the World Cup, so.
Or be a dancer.
No. I didn't get to go on the pitch for the 2013 World Cup. That's when I was a volunteer. But never mind. Go volunteer in the World Cup.
Yes, volunteering sign up is out there. So do it for 2021.
And you get some stash.
Yes, but we got green polo shirts in 2013 though. Like lime green polo
Well,
shirts.
I think the colour scheme might be a little bit better this time round. I've got a feeling it might
You're
be very
a fan
red.
of stash, aren't you?
You know, people. I mean,
Yes.
I know we have gone over, and I apologise.
I've got a lot of stash that I need to get rid of as well because I've got a box of England kit that used. What do you do with it?
Get on eBay. That's what Keith Senior did.
Oh, I can't sell it. That's wrong.
Well, you just said you want to get rid of it. I've done it here. We'll stick it on the wall.
We'll have a competition.
Yeah, signed shirt. Well, some of our people, we'll get the wrong kind of people getting involved on this.
Oh, it don't have to be signed.
Do you ever see that clip of Sam Burgess giving his shorts away to a girl at the?
Do you know who that girl was? Lindsay Cunnett, and she played for Sanningley, and she sniffed them.
Yes,
and I played alongside her. And do you know how
Have
many
you ever seen that
times?
film?
Do you know how many
Oh,
times
it's
we
classic.
used to play
It's
that
the
clip
fact
to
that
her?
you know her.
Yeah. And she literally walked away and sniffed them, and we played. That was the standing joke at every end of season.
What a point to end.
Well, that's why I
the
don't want to. Well, what do you want to do in the future? I mean, I kind of asked you this after the final. Obviously, you're going round again. After that, what do you want to do?
You've got to play again next year.
Yeah, I'm gonna. Next season is the main goal, and get to next season, and see where that goes. And then, I do genuinely think that I'll never play for England again, which is a hard pill to swallow, but so be it. And all the best to the girls going forward. I'll always be a huge fan and supporter of them. But I think I'd rather go into. I don't think I'm a coaching is probably not for me. I'm too highly strung, too emotional. So any other way,
I
I'd
thought you
still.
were going to say bossy then.
Do you know what? I'm actually not very bossy.
You've locked horns with Mr. Cuthbertson now.
Locked horns might not be the right way to put it. Maybe sometimes not seen eye to eye. But that's not necessarily about what's on the field. Maybe just some.
We all have falling
Yeah.
outs with people.
We never
as
fall
well.
out.
Falling
Well,
out.
Well, we all
no, but
disagreements with
It's
people.
the
as well.
ability.
like it.
It's the ability to state your opinion.
No, but I just like to. I'm not. I wouldn't ever disagree with it. Then I've got the utmost respect for my coach. If he said to me I had to do something, I'd ask why, and if there's a reasonable, then so be it. Regardless of what I think, if I've been justified why I do it, and that's all I do. But I will. I think I'm probably not annoying, but I don't just go yes because you're Adam Cuthbertson. I'm going to say what I'm going to bow down and say. I'll just go why, what, for what reason, and I will ask my role and what he sees my purpose on the team being. And that's all.
So you're not going to be a coach?
No.
Administrator?
No.
Media pundit?
I'd like to do some more of that. I think, with Lois, I think the ideal for getting the women's game out there is to have knowledge of it.
So you'd be Barry and Terry? You and I?
Yeah. Shotgun Barry.
I'm going to say, would you rather?
Shotgun Barry already. We were pretty much, he was 10, wasn't he? I'm 8. So Lois is that number 9 in the middle, so that's a real loose link I've got there, but...
All coming for our jobs, Phil.
That's fine.
And when I say jobs, that's in the very loosest term of job. I think there's a very interesting future ahead. And
I think just being part of the women's game at the moment.
it just
and
needs
it going
promoting,
forward.
yeah. It just needs promoting, and if that's... I don't even want any monetary kind of... it's not about that. It's literally about getting this game out there. And then, old cliche, 20 years' time, I'll be like, I helped, And I say that very loosely because, I go back to the original stalwarts of our game who have genuinely been the ones that set the ball rolling. But I think, as cheesy as it sounds, let's just promote this game and get it to be as good as it can be.
that'll do, won't it? That'll do, Zane.
It's been great. I hope
It's
people
like
have enjoyed it.
It's like media professionals knew how to end the programme. I just come over and turn the cameras off. I've only been doing this since 2002. Started off. In fact, it is my anniversary back this weekend of doing Accrington Stanley versus Frickley Athletic on the radio.
Who are they?
Exactly. And
Give
then
me some.
I actually did Rugby Union, Wakefield Rugby Union Club, before they were ruined by the Bradford Bulls.
Oh, calm yourself down.
Don't end on that note.
Come on, Britain.
Whoop whoop.
Yeah, that'll do. Dear. Bye, Facebook. See you next week.
Oh yes, and for those on
the podcast.
on the podcast, we have, all being well, another guest for next week in our series of
Guests.
4020 Meets.
So we'll call them.
Or 4020 Vegetarian, whichever you prefer.
2 hours and 6 minutes.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun.